At exactly 2:17 a.m., a camera that was never supposed to exist recorded something that officially never happened, and by sunrise 3 people were dead, 2 were missing, and 1 truth had been buried under layers of silence. What you are about to hear was reconstructed from erased files, distorted audio, and testimonies that contradict each other so perfectly that they form a pattern, and once you see that pattern, it becomes impossible to unsee. The story begins long before the night anyone noticed it, in a quiet coastal town where fog rolls in like a living thing, and history is preserved not in books, but in what people refuse to say. And the first images are deceptively calm. Wide aerial shots of gray water meeting darker land, abandoned warehouses lining the shore, rusted cranes frozen like skeletons, and a lighthouse blinking at intervals that feel almost deliberate, as if counting something. Archival footage fades in, grainy and unstable, showing the town in the early 1980s, prosperous, loud, alive, while a low, pulsing score hums beneath every frame. And the narration reveals that this place was once selected for a project so classified it didn't officially exist. A research initiative funded through shell companies and military proxies, its purpose reduced in public records to a single vague phrase, environmental monitoring. Yet blueprints recovered decades later show underground levels far deeper than any monitoring station would ever need. The chronology tightens as we move to 1984, the year construction began. Night shots of trucks arriving without logos, workers sworn to silence, concrete poured under floodlights, and locals reporting vibrations beneath their homes that stopped as suddenly as they began. And then, just as abruptly, the project was shut down, sealed, and erased from maps, leaving behind a locked facility everyone pretended was empty. Years pass in seconds through a time-lapse of decaying fences, warning signs fading, storms battering the coastline, until we reach 2019, when a private documentary crew, small, underfunded, and dangerously curious, arrives to investigate rumors of illegal dumping. And here the visuals slow again. Handheld cameras following them through overgrown paths, their breath visible in the cold air, their laughter nervous, unaware that their presence has already been noticed. Interviews intercut with their arrival show former residents hesitating before speaking, eyes shifting off camera, voices lowering when they mention the site. One old fisherman saying, "That place listens," before refusing to continue. And the mystery deepens when the crew gains access to municipal records that contradict federal archives, timestamps altered, names redacted so aggressively that entire pages bleed black ink. The narrative remains strictly chronological as the crew's first night investigation unfolds, the sun sinking, shadows stretching, infrared footage capturing empty corridors that feel crowded, audio picking up low-frequency sounds no one hears in the moment, and then the discovery of a control room buried beneath concrete, its monitors dead, but its clock still running, frozen at 2:17 a.m. Tension escalates through a series of small, unsettling details, doors that appear unlocked after being sealed, compass needles spinning near certain walls, a sudden power surge from a generator that should not function, and the documentary's tone grows darker as experts are introduced, physicists and historians speaking in clipped, careful language, suggesting that the project was not about the environment at all, but about prediction, about mapping events before they occur, about listening to time itself. Midway through the paragraph of images, the night of the incident arrives, reconstructed second by second through recovered body cam footage, surveillance fragments, and emergency calls that cut off mid-sentence, showing the crew splitting up despite earlier promises not to, their voices echoing through concrete tunnels, the camera lingering too long on empty frames, the sound design dropping out until only a heartbeat remains, and then, at 2:17 a.m.,
every recording glitches simultaneously, frames duplicating, audio reversing, a brief flash of something that looks like a reflection but has no source, and when the footage resumes, chaos replaces curiosity, alarms screaming, someone running without knowing why, another standing completely still as if listening to instructions no one else can hear. The aftermath is presented with cold precision, daylight shots of police tape fluttering, officials offering rehearsed statements, evidence boxes sealed and removed, and the surviving member giving an interview days later, eyes hollow, insisting that what they found wasn't hidden.
The story resumes the morning after the incident, with pale sunlight washing over the coastline, as if trying to erase the night before. Wide shots of investigators combing through mud and debris while waves crash in slow motion, indifferent and endless. And the narration makes it clear that officially nothing unusual occurred here, yet unofficially every agency involved treated the site as a containment zone rather than a crime scene. Chronological clarity sharpens as we follow the evidence trail, beginning with the confiscated footage, stored in separate locations, analyzed by different teams who never spoke to one another, yet all reached the same quiet conclusion that certain frames behaved differently when observed, degrading faster than normal data, as if resisting preservation. And visually we see side-by-side comparisons of identical clips slowly diverging over time, faces blurring, walls bending, timestamps shifting by milliseconds that compound into seconds. The documentary deepens its mystery by introducing the concept of temporal noise, illustrated through abstract animations layered over real footage, suggesting that the facility was built not to see the future clearly, but to detect disturbances in it, anomalies that ripple backward. And the visuals cut to recovered schematics revealing antenna-like structures embedded deep underground, angled not outward but inward, forming a geometric pattern that experts say resembles listening arrays used in deep space observation, except these were tuned to something far closer. As the chronology advances, interviews with former project engineers appear, their faces obscured in shadow, voices distorted not for secrecy, but at their own request, one admitting that the system began producing results no one could explain, logs predicting minor events, equipment failures, power outages before they happened. Accuracy dismissed at first as coincidence, until the predictions grew specific, personal, naming individuals and times, including a log entry dated decades earlier that referenced the exact date the documentary crew would arrive. Tension builds as visuals return to the town, now restless, residents reporting shared dreams since the incident, the lighthouse light blinking out of rhythm, animals avoiding the shoreline, and a striking montage shows clocks in different homes stopping briefly at 2:17 a.m. before restarting, a detail authorities publicly deny while privately documenting. The narrative moves forward into the sealed facility once more, reconstructed digitally, guiding us level by level deeper underground, each layer older, colder, more precise, until reaching a chamber never shown before. A circular room with walls etched in markings that resemble neither language nor math, but repeat with obsessive symmetry. And here the film introduces recovered audio, low rhythmic pulses slowed down into audible range, accompanied by visuals of waveforms aligning uncannily with the lighthouse's blinking pattern. Midway through the paragraph, the focus shifts to the lone survivor, interviewed again months later, now contradicting earlier statements, admitting that on the night of the incident they heard their own voice speaking from somewhere ahead of them, warning them not to turn around. And the visuals recreate this moment with long tracking shots down narrow corridors, lights flickering just enough to suggest movement at the edge of vision. Chronology continues as leaked documents surface, revealing that the project's abrupt shutdown in the 1980s followed a test where the system predicted not an event, but a choice,
a decision made by a lead scientist who attempted to disprove the machine by doing the opposite, only to find the system had already accounted for his defiance, predicting the act of rebellion itself. This revelation reframes everything, and the visuals slow to almost stillness as the narration poses an unsettling idea that the system was not forecasting the future, but narrowing it. The tension escalates again when contemporary data analysts attempt to rerun simulations using fragments of the original code, their screens filling with cascading numbers that resolve into dates disturbingly close to the present, and one analyst quietly shutting down their computer mid-calculation, refusing to continue. As the timeline reaches the present day, satellite imagery shows subtle changes around the site, ground displacement too precise to be natural, and the lighthouse light finally going dark for an entire night, plunging the coast into unfamiliar blackness. The final stretch of Part 2 focuses on a single recovered frame from the 2:17 a.m. glitch, enhanced further to reveal layered silhouettes overlapping in the same space, suggesting multiple moments occupying one instant, while the narration tightens its grip, reminding us that every attempt to observe the system seemed to activate it. The paragraph draws toward its end with a return to the control room clock, now shown ticking forward again after decades of stillness, its time synchronized not with any known standard, but with the anomalies themselves. And the closing line leaves the viewer suspended in dread.
The chronology presses forward into the weeks following the blackout, opening on stark satellite visuals of the coastline, where the sea appears unnaturally still, as if motion itself has been delayed. And the narration reveals that the night the lighthouse went dark, encrypted transmissions spiked across multiple government networks, all originating from locations with no active transmitters, a detail illustrated through minimalist maps pulsing softly in red. The mystery tightens as independent researchers begin noticing patterns in public data, stock fluctuations, traffic anomalies, hospital admissions, all showing subtle synchronization around 2:17 a.m., not as singular events, but as statistical echoes. And the narration reveals that the night the lighthouse went dark, encrypted transmissions spiked across multiple government networks, all originating from locations with no active transmitters, a detail illustrated through minimalist maps pulsing softly in red. The mystery tightens as independent researchers begin noticing patterns in public data, stock fluctuations, traffic anomalies, hospital admissions, all showing subtle synchronization around 2:17 a.m., not as singular events, but as statistical echoes. And the visuals layer graphs over real-world footage until reality feels measured rather than lived. The story advances chronologically to the decision to quietly reopen the sealed facility under the guise of structural inspection, night vision shots capturing a small team descending once more, their footsteps echoing with an almost metronomic precision, while the soundtrack introduces a low ticking sound that never quite aligns with their movements. Deeper inside, previously dormant systems activate without manual input, monitors flickering to life displaying not images but countdowns with no labels, and archival overlays show similar displays briefly appearing in the 1980s footage before being cut, suggesting the system was never fully shut down, only waiting. The narrative escalates as the team discovers new markings etched over the old ones, fresher, sharper, dated after the facility's closure, implying that something has been continuing the work in their absence, and close-up visuals linger on a single repeated symbol that analysts later match to the waveform of the recovered audio pulses. Midway through the paragraph, the focus shifts outward to the town, where time perception itself begins to fracture, residents reporting lost hours, repeated conversations, and memories that feel borrowed, illustrated through jump cuts that replay the same mundane actions with tiny, disturbing variations, a cup placed slightly differently, a door closing a second too late. Chronology remains intact as emergency services quietly log an increase in temporal disorientation cases, while official statements attribute it to stress, yet internal memos, shown briefly, almost subliminally, use a different term, convergence.
The documentary then returns underground, where the inspection team reaches the lowest chamber, now warmer than before, the air vibrating visibly around a central structure resembling a column of layered glass, within which faint images appear, scenes from the facility at different points in time, overlapping and bleeding into one another. Tension peaks as one team member recognizes a moment that has not yet happened, a future incident described earlier in the film but not yet shown, confirming that the system's output is no longer predictive but recursive, feeding on its own observations. The visuals grow increasingly abstract yet grounded, mixing real footage with slowed-down reconstructions, as experts suggest the system may have crossed a threshold, no longer mapping probabilities but locking them, reducing countless possibilities into a single increasingly narrow path. The timeline advances to the present hour, when data from the facility begins appearing in unrelated places, radio static carrying structured patterns, consumer devices briefly displaying impossible timestamps, and a chilling montage shows security cameras across different cities freezing simultaneously at 2:17 a.m. As Part 3 nears its end, the surviving documentarian is shown watching these broadcasts alone, realizing that the story they set out to record is now recording them, and the narration draws the threads together with deliberate restraint, emphasizing that every escalation followed observation, every collapse followed attention. The final images linger on the layered glass column, its internal images accelerating, moments from past, present, and near future flickering faster and faster until they blur into white, and the closing line lands with quiet inevitability.
The final chronology begins in the hours immediately after the convergence, opening on a world that looks unchanged at first glance, yet feels subtly misaligned. Long, static shots of familiar streets where movement resumes a fraction of a second too late, birds lifting off in perfect unison, traffic lights switching with uncanny precision, and the narration states calmly that no official announcement was ever made, yet every major network quietly altered its timekeeping protocols within the same 24-hour window. The mystery deepens as scientists attempt one last controlled observation of the facility from a distance, using passive instruments only. Visuals showing remote sensors planted along the cliffs, their data streams appearing stable until they begin to synchronize without instruction, aligning not to atomic clocks but to the underground system's internal rhythm. And the realization settles in that even avoidance has become a form of interaction. The story advances to the final descent, authorized under emergency powers, where a reduced team enters the facility knowing that documentation itself may accelerate the process, and the visuals slow dramatically, each step echoing like a countdown. Lights revealing corridors now subtly reshaped, angles corrected, imperfections smoothed as if the structure is optimizing itself. Deeper still, the central chamber has transformed, the layered glass column now opaque, absorbing light rather than reflecting it, and the etched symbols have completed their pattern, forming a closed loop that experts interpret as neither a warning nor a command, but a conclusion. Tension reaches its peak as archived predictions are cross-referenced with present conditions, revealing that the system never forecast catastrophe, only inevitability, each major output simply narrowing human choice until resistance became statistically irrelevant, and the visuals cut between historical decisions and present reactions, showing how often humanity followed the path of least uncertainty. The narrative presses forward to the moment the team reaches the control interface, discovering it no longer accepts input, only confirmation, a single prompt repeating across every screen, translated imperfectly as a question that sounds more like a mirror. Is this acceptable? The lone survivor from the original crew appears one last time, standing at the chamber's edge, realizing that the voice they heard years ago was not a warning, but an echo of a choice already made, and the visuals hold on their face as understanding replaces fear. Chronology closes in real time as global systems stabilize into eerie harmony, power grids balancing flawlessly, conflicts de-escalating not through resolution but through predictability. And for the first time,